Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we're going to see what Crimson Peak is. Among the most captivating creations of master Guillermo del Toro, Crimson Peak undoubtedly stands out. This work did not emerge suddenly, but rather was born from years of creative gestation and a passion for the Gothic genre. The germ of the film dates back to 2006, when Del Toro, together with screenwriter Matthew Robbins, began shaping a script infused with mystery, dark romance, and a profound homage to the classics of cinema. The director himself describes his work as a Gothic story that fuses romance and ghosts, drawing inspiration from masterpieces such as The Haunting, Robert Wise, 1963, The Innocents, Jack Clayton, 1961, and The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, 1980. These references not only define the tone of the film, but also reveal Del Toro's intention to explore the psychology of fear, memory, and lost love. Although Universal Pictures acquired the rights to produce it, the project remained on hold for almost a decade due to the filmmaker's busy schedule and involvement in other large-scale projects. It would not be until 2014 that cameras finally rolled and the vision took tangible form. The result is a visual and emotional masterpiece, a film that combines artistic design, exquisite cinematography, and a deeply symbolic narrative. Personally, I consider Crimson Peak not only an aesthetic achievement, but also one of Del Toro's most brilliant works, thanks to its masterful blend of mystery, dramatic tension, and supernatural elements that evoke an unforgettable dark beauty. For this reason, in this analysis, I want to delve deeply into Crimson Peak, exploring not only its complex plot and the disturbing specters that inhabit it, but also the fascinating details behind its production. From the art and set design to the literary and cinematic influences that shaped its soul. The story initially unfolds in 1887 in the industrial city of Buffalo, New York. There we meet Edith Cushing, a young heiress of considerable fortune, but marked by a tragic destiny. Edith lives under the shadow of a childhood shaped by secrets and omens. It is during this period that she receives the disturbing visit of her mother's ghost, a disfigured figure dressed in black, covered with a veil that hides her face, carrying a chilling message. Her warning is clear and ominous: stay away from Crimson Peak. These words are not only a warning, but a mysterious key to a fate Edith does not yet understand. We then advance to 1901 and see Edith as a young woman, passionate about writing and determined to make her way in the literary world. Although her true vocation is ghost stories, editors insist that she write more conventional romantic tales, relegating her works to constant rejection. At this point, her life feels trapped between her desires and external expectations. It is then that Sir Thomas Sharpe bursts into her life, accompanied by his sister Lucille, seeking funding for a mysterious clay mine and a machine of their own creation. Thomas is an enigmatic English aristocrat, wrapped in an aura of melancholy and secrets. He presents his proposal to Carter Cushing, Edith's father, but Carter dismisses it coldly, suspicious of the Sharpes' true intentions. Still, between Edith and Thomas, an intense, almost immediate connection is born, a relationship marked by attraction and mystery, stirring unease in those around them. Carter Cushing and Alan McMichael, a close family friend, sense that something dark lies behind the English baron's facade. Carter even hires a private investigator, uncovering disturbing secrets about the Sharpes and their mysterious mine. Faced with these findings, Carter tries to protect Edith by offering money in exchange for the Sharpes staying away from her. Thomas accepts, but leaves a letter explaining his abrupt distancing. This gesture, although seemingly rational, only increases the aura of mystery surrounding him. During this period, Edith's mother's ghost reappears with renewed intensity, reinforcing her warning to stay away from Crimson Peak. However, caught between love, curiosity, and suspicion, Edith still cannot grasp the real weight of those words. Everything changes when, shortly before the Sharpes return to England, Carter Cushing is brutally murdered in the bathroom of a club. The official version dismisses it as an accident, but the brutality of the act and the circumstances surrounding it suggest otherwise, leaving Edith in a state of anguish and bewilderment. Plunged into pain and solitude, Edith finally accepts Thomas's marriage proposal. She decides to accompany him to England, embarking on a journey into the unknown. What follows is not only a story of forbidden love, but a dizzying descent into a life shrouded in mystery, danger, and ancient secrets within Crimson Peak itself. When Edith crosses the threshold of Allerdale Hall, she is not simply entering a stately residence. She is stepping into a living universe of mystery, decay, and ancient secrets. What she finds is far more than a mansion. It is an imposing Gothic structure, built atop the highest hill of a red clay mine. Its walls, blackened by time and moisture, seem to whisper forgotten stories. Every stone of Allerdale Hall is imbued with an unsettling aura, as if the house itself were a conscious entity, guardian of dark secrets. From the moment she arrives, Edith senses that the atmosphere is charged with tension and distrust. Lucille greets her with palpable coldness. Her measured gestures and restrained smile fail to hide an underlying hostility. Thomas, for his part, adopts a distant attitude, interspersed with glances filled with melancholy and a strange fascination toward Edith. These behaviors awaken in her a growing suspicion. Every gesture, every silence reinforces the sense that the Sharpes do not possess the wealth or status they project. It is as if behind their elegant facade there lies a painful truth, a carefully woven lie. Although the siblings wear fine and elegant clothing, Edith instinctively senses that these garments are old, worn, and out of time. The velvet has broken threads, the lace shows yellowing from age, and the jewels appear to be forgotten relics. This detail reveals a disturbing truth beneath the mask of opulence. Deep deprivation, decay disguised as grandeur. As she tries to adapt to her new surroundings, Allerdale Hall begins to reveal its darkest secrets. Shadows seem to move of their own accord, and the mansion emits inaudible whispers that brush against the ear in the silent corridors. Edith witnesses unsettling visions, cadaverous female specters covered in red clay, slowly emerging from the earth like living shadows. Their forms are grotesque and beautiful at once, wrapped in an aura of ancient pain. These apparitions fill Edith with terror, but also with an irresistible curiosity. In her state of anxiety, Thomas decides to temporarily take her away from the mansion, bringing her to a nearby village to attend to certain matters, trying to distract her from what her instincts have already begun to suspect. That same night, a violent snowstorm breaks out, cutting off any possibility of return. Forced to remain outside the mansion, Edith and Thomas take refuge in a dark inn, where the air is heavy with moisture and aged wood. That evening transforms into an intimate and disturbing ritual. Beneath a climate charged with tension, veiled confessions, and deep glances, they consummate their marriage. It is not only an act of love, but a seal that binds them within a secret pact, marked by shadows and mysteries yet to be revealed. The next day, upon returning to Allerdale Hall, Lucille greets Edith with a clear gesture of disdain, carrying a silent hostility that chills the blood. Thomas, aware of the growing tension, chooses to reveal a disturbing fact. The residence is known as Crimson Peak, a name born of legend and a macabre vision. The red clay of the mine, when mixed with snow, dyes the landscape a blood-like hue, as if foreshadowing tragedy. This detail is not merely anecdotal, but a visual metaphor for the fate awaiting those who cross its doors. As the days pass, Edith's health begins to slowly deteriorate. Fatigue becomes a shadow that envelopes her. Her steps grow heavy, and her body begins to succumb to an invisible malady. Finally, terrifyingly, she begins to cough up blood, a symptom that becomes a macabre warning. Yet, despite her fear, her instinct drives her to explore the mansion in search of answers. Every corridor, every room, becomes a labyrinth of secrets, permeated by an air of ancestral tragedy. In her exploration, she discovers a disturbing truth. Thomas Sharpe had been married to 3 wealthy women, all of whom died from poisoning. This macabre pattern is no accident, but a dark strategy to seize the fortunes of others. The discovery turns the mansion into a prison of suspicions and latent horrors. One of the ghosts leads her to clay containers, where she finds an antique phonograph. The needle stops, but not before playing a chilling recording, the voice of Enola Chiatti, one of Thomas's previous wives. Through tragic whispers, Enola recounts how she was slowly poisoned by the Sharpes to strip her of her fortune, leaving a testimony as a warning to whoever might listen. Edith then understands the terrifying truth. She herself is destined for the same fate. The tea Lucille offers her daily is poisoned, a gesture disguised as hospitality that turns into a mortal threat. But the horror reaches its peak when Edith discovers the darkest truth. Thomas and Lucille have maintained an incestuous relationship for years, and from it a child was born who died sickly soon after birth. What once seemed a mystery becomes a web of crime, madness, and perversion. Finally, Edith discovers that Lucille, in a desperate and violent act, murdered her own mother upon discovering that forbidden relationship, thereby securing Thomas's inheritance of Allerdale Hall and the family mine. Over time, however, the clay mine lost its value, leaving the Sharpes in ruin, trapped in a hell of decay, secrets, and blood. Thus, Lucille and Thomas Sharpe devised a plan of unparalleled coldness and perversity, a pact born of ambition, desire, and madness. Thomas was to seduce and marry wealthy women, while Lucille waited in the shadows so that both of them could then end their lives in a calculated manner, appropriating their fortunes. It was a machinery of greed as precise as it was chilling. The money obtained from these unions would serve to finance the machines and projects Thomas aspired to develop in the United States, ambitions that, for them, had no limits. The plan was not only a crime of murder, but a macabre ritual that transformed greed into a dark art, where marriage became the gateway to death. But the truth, as in every good Gothic plot, did not remain hidden for long. Justice, though belated, began to weave its own conspiracy. Alan McMichael, Edith's childhood friend and silent guardian of her affection, discovered hidden clues that Carter Cushing had left before dying. Among forgotten letters, concealed notes, and sealed confidences, a secret legacy emerged. The existence of successive marriages of Thomas Sharpe, each ending in suspicious death. Even more disturbing was the revelation about Lucille, whose hidden history included having been institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital due to her violent and murderous impulses. These discoveries not only confirmed the suspicions, but unearthed a dark, twisted, and dangerous past. Armed with this information, Alan decided to act. His path led him to Allerdale Hall, the sinister mansion known as Crimson Peak, located on the border between England and Scotland, wrapped in legends and tragedies. There, he entered the web of secrets and shadows the Sharpes had woven over years. However, upon arriving, he immediately became a victim of the Sharpe conspiracy. Lucille, with cold resolve, ordered Thomas to finish him off. Thomas, torn between obedience and inner conflict, gravely wounded him, while Lucille, with a cruel gesture, stabbed him, leaving him lying in a hallway cloaked in shadows. Wounded and weakened, Alan still tried to protect Edith, struggling against the weight of betrayal and the death that pursued him. But the Sharpes' plan began to fracture unexpectedly. Thomas, tired of his sister's tyranny and absolute control, began to question his role in their macabre machinery. The weight of his crimes and his own conscience led him to an unexpected place. He had genuinely fallen in love with Edith. That love, pure and desperate, transformed his decision. In an act of betrayal toward his own scheme, he wounded Alan only superficially and hid him in the mansion, keeping him alive to protect him. Thomas began to see in Edith not merely another piece in his plan, but a reason to break the cycle of violence that had consumed him. Amid this tension, Lucille forced Edith to sign a document transferring the entire Cushing fortune to the Sharpes. At that moment, with a mixture of rage and confession, Lucille revealed her crime. She had murdered Carter Cushing, making it appear to be a tragic accident. Her words fell like a knife in Edith's mind, making her feel how truth shattered her world. Seizing the distraction, Edith, driven by fear and rage, grabbed a pen as a weapon and stabbed Lucille, attempting to escape the nightmare she had fallen into. But the tragedy's fate was not yet complete. Thomas burst in at that decisive moment. He confronted his sister with a mixture of pain and resolve, threw the contract into the fire, and declared his desire to leave the mansion with Edith, leaving behind the dark shadow of Crimson Peak. However, Lucille, consumed by jealousy and madness, could not accept it. For her, Thomas had promised that he would never love another woman he married, for his only affection should belong exclusively to her. Driven by obsessive delirium, Lucille brutally murdered her own brother, unleashing a deadly pursuit of Edith through the shadowed halls of the mansion. In the final climax, terror reached its peak. Edith, trapped between death and survival, found unknown strength to defend herself. With the unexpected help of Thomas's spirit, who appeared as a vengeful shadow, she managed to deliver a fatal blow to Lucille with a shovel. Before vanishing forever, Thomas's ghost bid Edith farewell, sealing their eternal bond in a whisper filled with love and regret. Shortly after, Edith and Alan were found and rescued by the villagers, who, following Alan's warnings, had arrived at Allerdale Hall. The village watched the mansion from afar, aware that something more than stone and clay remained there, a story of crime, forbidden love, and ghosts. Lucille's fate was sealed in tragedy. Her spirit remained trapped in the mansion, transformed into the black ghost of Crimson Peak, condemned to wander its halls forever, playing her lonely piano as an echo of her obsession and madness. An eternal lament that became legend. In the final scene, during the credits, we discover that Edith turned her experience into a book entitled Crimson Peak, a narration that is not only a testimony of horror, but also an intimate confession of all she had lived through, a tale inspired by shadows, ghosts, and supernatural encounters that marked her destiny forever. The ending is not only narrative, but symbolic. The story of Allerdale Hall becomes immortal, trapped between the pages of a book and the bloody echoes of Crimson Peak. Thus, we arrive at the very heart of Crimson Peak, and in this segment I want to delve deeply not only into the ghosts that populate the film, but also into the fascinating details of its creation, symbolism, and production. This is one of the most important pillars of Guillermo del Toro's work, for in it there is not only visual terror. There is a narrative language charged with meaning, where every spectral appearance serves an emotional and thematic purpose. One of the most powerful and distinctive aspects of this work is the way del Toro integrates the specters into the narrative. Rather than being mere elements of fear, these ghosts are living warnings, voices from the past trying to guide Edith, protect her, and save her from a fatal fate. In their aesthetic and narrative construction, each appearance is a piece of a puzzle that reveals the hidden story of Allerdale Hall, the crimes of the Sharpes, and the curse that weighs upon the mansion. Del Toro confessed that he was inspired for these specters by the Talland Man, a mummy discovered in Denmark in the 1950s. This archaeological find revealed the almost intact body of a man from the Middle Ages, preserved thanks to the unique properties of a peat bog, but deformed by the acids of its environment. That image deeply impressed the director. A body preserved in death, marked by eternal silence and unsettling deformity. Del Toro took that image and fused it with the legend of the red clay mine where Thomas and Lucille Sharpe disposed of the bodies of their victims, thereby creating specters with a disturbing, organic, and deeply symbolic aesthetic. In their design, these ghosts are almost sculptural figures, like bodies molded from clay, snow, and blood, uniting the macabre with the poetic. A fascinating detail is that the color of each specter in the film reflects the way that person died. Thus arise black, red, and white figures, each loaded with meaning. This is not a simple visual resource, but a deliberate choice that turns every apparition into a living metaphor. The first specter we encounter is Eleanor Cushing, Edith's mother. She appears at two key moments in the narrative to warn her about the threat of Crimson Peak. Her black tone corresponds to death by cholera, known as the Black Plague or Black Infection, and is also a deliberate nod to the ebony coffin in which she was buried. Del Toro chose to give this specter visible eyes, an artistic and narrative decision that intensifies its emotional weight. It is not a malevolent entity, but a protective mother. In her appearance, her eyes glow for a moment with a spectral light, conveying desperation and maternal love. At these moments, her presence is almost an urgent warning, an echo of a tragedy she tries to prevent. In Allerdale Hall, Edith is haunted by other specters, each linked to a specific crime, to a particular victim of the Sharpe's ambition. Thomas and Lucille's deceased wives, and the disturbed spirit of their mother. The first red specter we encounter is Margaret McDermott, who appears to Edith while she ascends in the mansion's elevator. Her figure is unsettling, covered in red clay, with an almost cadaverous appearance. Her presence is a harbinger of violence. Margaret reappears in another deeply disturbing scene, playing with Enola's dog in the bathroom and taking the ball, a strange gesture that increases Edith's confusion and terror. Margaret, originally from Edinburgh, Scotland, died after being slowly weakened with poisoned tea administered by Lucille. Afterwards, Lucille beat her until she fractured her skull, cut off a finger to take her ring, and threw her body into the clay mines. Her spectral figure embodies the slow and cruel pain of her death, a living reminder of domestic violence and boundless greed. The second specter is Pamela Upton, a woman who used a wheelchair due to a congenital condition. Her death was also caused by Lucille's poison, but her end was even more cruel. She was later hanged. Pamela is perhaps one of the most terrifying ghosts in the film, for her figure drags a heavy wheelchair as she moves through the halls of Allerdale Hall. The metallic, squeaking sound of her wheels breaks the silence, creating an atmosphere of anguish and despair. Her presence is not only a warning, but a physical manifestation of pain and helplessness. The third, perhaps the most disturbing, is Enola Sciatti, a woman from Milan, and the first wife for whom Thomas felt true love, despite having promised Lucille never to fall fully in love with any. Thomas prolonged her life by administering small doses of poison, a dark gesture that mixed love and destruction. Enola had a child who was also poisoned weeks before her death. Lucille, in an act of extreme cruelty, cut off one of her fingers to take her ring before throwing her body into the clay pits. Enola's specter is one of the most tragic and moving presences in the film. She appears to Edith when she is weakened and in a wheelchair, carrying her dead baby in her arms. Her image moves through the mansion's 3 floors, wrapped in a silence filled with lament. It is a scene of great symbolic weight. It not only reveals the hidden truth of the Sharpes, but also transforms Enola into a spectral guide, leading Edith to the attic, the heart of Crimson Peak. There, amid whispers and tears, she reveals the final and most terrible secret hidden in the mansion, thus closing the cycle of warnings and revelations that the ghosts of Allerdale Hall have woven throughout the story. In the dark and complex narrative fabric of Crimson Peak, one of the most unsettling, symbolic, and significant spirits is that of Beatrix Sharpe, mother of Thomas and Lucille. Her presence is not a mere supernatural element, but a key piece in the moral and emotional structure of the story. She is a living warning, a figure trapped in her own pain, and a victim of the cruelest violence. Beatrix's death was neither an accident nor a random act, but a brutal and desperate crime, perpetrated by her own daughter, Lucille. What happened is an episode of extreme violence that reveals not only Lucille's perverse nature, but also the dark core of the Sharpe family. Lucille attacked her mother while she was bathing, an act laden with symbolism. Water, a symbol of purification, transformed into a scene of death. Using a butcher's knife, she drove the blade deeply into Beatrix's forehead after striking her repeatedly against the bathtub until she was defenseless. The motive for this crime was to prevent Beatrix from separating the siblings, thereby ensuring the continuity of the criminal pact they themselves had forged. It was a desperate act, a sacrifice marked by fanaticism and greed, which would forever change the fate of the Sharpes and the legacy of Allerdale Hall. After her death, Beatrix's body was initially buried on the property, a gesture revealing the intent to conceal the truth, although it could not erase the mark of the crime. Later, her corpse was thrown into the red clay pits, where the earth acted as a moist and transformative tomb. The passage of time grotesquely deformed her body, turning it into a unique specter, similar to Thomas's previous wives. The red clay not only marked her physical form, but also her spectral essence, merging blood, clay, and memory into a terrifying figure. Beatrix's ghost also bears a bleeding mark on her forehead, a persistent witness to the mortal wound inflicted by her own daughter, an indelible mark that speaks of betrayal, pain, and thwarted maternal love. Guillermo del Toro wanted to give Beatrix a unique deformity, drawing inspiration from the Talland Man and his fascination with preserved bodies that resemble living sculptures of pain. Thus, he endowed her spirit with eyes 5 times larger than normal, eyes filled with anguish, pain, and penitence. This aesthetic choice is not arbitrary. It seeks to convey the emotional weight of a mother who was a victim of filial violence and now persists as an ethereal warning. Beatrix appears to Edith at 2 decisive moments. First inside the bathtub, as a ghostly echo of the place where she met her death, and later in the shadowy halls of Allerdale Hall, always as a silent, somber, and urgent presence, trying to save her from the fate she could not avoid. Another relevant spirit is that of Thomas Sharpe. Although his appearance is brief, it is decisive to the plot. Thomas manifests as an act of redemption, confusing Lucille in order to save Edith. In his final appearance, he activates the clay-extracting machine, a gesture laden with meaning. It is not only a physical tool, but a symbol of his sacrifice. Del Toro explained that he wanted to depict him this way because Thomas is not a direct killer like his sister. He is an idealist trapped in a criminal cycle, a victim of his own ambitions and the unhealthy bond he maintained with Lucille. His final appearance, bathed in a luminous white tone, symbolizes redemption, sacrifice, and his desire to free Edith, closing his narrative arc with a mixture of tragedy and nobility. But the specter that crowns this cast is undoubtedly that of Lucille Sharpe. She is a black spirit, not due to disease, but because of the malignity of her acts and the absolute corruption of her soul. Lucille not only murdered Thomas's wives and Enola's child, but also her own mother, perpetuating a cycle of violence and greed without remorse. That dark color is not a visual accident, but the mark of a soul corrupted to the core. Lucille did not kill only for money. She enjoyed it, feeding her own obsession. As a macabre trophy, she kept locks of hair from her victims, including Beatrix, alongside the butcher's knife she used to commit her crimes, symbols of her power and madness. In her final act, Lucille's violence reaches its peak. She first stabs Thomas in the torso and then brutally kills him by driving the blade into his face. This act of extreme violence justifies why her spirit is the darkest of them all. Del Toro wanted to both close and open the film with the presence of a black specter, making Lucille the central figure of all ghosts, their dark mother. Her fate is eternal, to remain trapped in Allerdale Hall, condemned to play the piano she loved so much, isolated in her own nightmare of violence, obsession, and remorse. The director emphasizes that despite the terrifying appearance of the specters, his intention was for them to be seen as tormented souls, full of pain and penitence. For Del Toro, the true monsters of the story are not the ghosts, but the Sharpe siblings, for the real horror arises from human evil, from hatred, obsession, and boundless ambition. A remarkable aspect is that most of these specters were created through practical effects, using specialized makeup, prosthetics, and organic textures, with CGI employed only to add ectoplasm, transparency, and a translucent aspect that makes them so unsettling. This combination of effects creates a realism that makes the ghosts almost physical presences, disturbing for their corporeality and symbolism. Regarding production, the gestation of Crimson Peak was as slow and passionate as the story it tells. Del Toro and Matthew Robbins wrote the script in 2006, after completing Pan's Labyrinth, selling it to Universal Pictures. Originally, Del Toro wished to direct it immediately, but his schedule filled with other projects such as Hellboy 2 and The Hobbit. Universal proposed several alternative directors, but none convinced them until Del Toro, during work on Pacific Rim, presented 3 scripts to Legendary Pictures at The Mountains of Madness, The Count of Monte Cristo, and Crimson Peak, with the latter ultimately chosen. Universal allowed Del Toro to develop the project with Legendary, and the director described the film as a Gothic ghost story with romance, a renewed classic. Although it is not only a love story, it includes deeply disturbing scenes that earned it an R rating. Del Toro sought for Crimson Peak to stand alongside the great classics of horror, such as The Omen, The Exorcist, and The Shining, also paying homage to works like The Haunting and The Innocents. The result is a work that fuses drama, romance, and horror with a unique style, loaded with symbolism, atmosphere, and emotion.